back once again. Back-to-back episodes for the first time in a long time, so it's a good month for us so far. Yeah, thank you. We are here for many reasons. First off, it is the Dark Knight's 15th anniversary as of, isn't it like the 11th or 12th?
Yes.
I think we should have probably looked that up before.
It will be the 14th.
The 14th. Okay, cool. So as of the 14th, it'll be 15 years old. It'll be legally enough to get a learner's permit.
They can almost drive the Batmobile.
And also Oppenheimer, the fun, lighthearted movie that I think we're all excited to see opposite the dark and gritty existential film, Barbie. So in honor of that, we decided to go back and remaster our Christopher Nolan podcast, so that way you don't have to.
Yeah. Who would ever want to watch that?
Yeah, it's like playing like The Last of Us Part 1 or 2, and then just going back and playing like Bubsy 3D. So we're just gonna go ahead and the redux, if you will. So bear with us. This won't be a 3-hour pod. I don't think it will, but it's gonna be a long one. It's gonna be a long one. So
we'll try to keep it short.
Just buckle in, and here we go. So, Christopher Nolan, one of the most polarizing directors working right now, has stayed in the main mainstream. Sure, I was looking for a better word, but has stayed in the mainstream for a good while now, almost 20 years. I think it will be 20 years actually, a little over 20.
Batman Begins came out in 2005, so I think from about then onwards, he stayed in the public consciousness.
Because I think with Memento, people were like, "This is cool," but also
it's an indie film. Not many people saw it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Even though it was an Academy Award nominee, but anyways, regardless, your I guess just thoughts on Nolan before we start diving into his illustrious career.
He seems like a good guy. I've never met him before. Would love to. Thoughts on Nolan? I'll give my thoughts on Nolan doing the reverse of what I did with Greta Gerwig. I'll start by thinking about what I think his future is going to look like.
Okay.
Because this track record that he has of blockbuster films, from Dark Knight, Inception, Interstellar, Tenet, just this whole run that he's had. I think when Tenet came out, we were both wondering, can he go back to doing something smaller? And it seems like he has no interest at all in reducing his budget or his vision. Yeah. Which I respect. There's a degree to which I personally feel like if you can, blow up a nuclear bomb on a $100 million budget in every single film, the real challenge is going to be not doing that. Forcing yourself to do something smaller. Yeah. I still think that's in his future. I still think that he is either he's a flop away from just a 2-hour film of a guy in a room, and that'll be it. But I think that he'll get there one day. So that's my thoughts on Christopher Nolan in a very Nolan-esque way, by trying to predict his future. Messing with time here right off the beginning.
Backwards.
Yeah. I'll end by
We'll end by how we feel about
the following. Yeah. But what about you? I mean, I will admit you're a far bigger fan of Nolan than I am personally.
Yes.
So when you think about how not just his impact on Hollywood, but how other people talk about him, how other people see his films.
Oh, I thought there was gonna be a question there.
No. Just like, how do you feel like there's a difference between you're a Nolan fanboy, but the general audience still doesn't get it, or do you feel like he has managed to merge the two?
I feel like he has managed to merge because I think the number one thing that people do appreciate about him is his authenticity to the craft. You know, he is willing to be like, yo, we are gonna go shoot in Iceland because you know, Batman is in Iceland.
Yeah.
You know, like, we're not going to film on the backstage of the Warner Brothers lot. We will film on the beaches of Dunkirk because that is what calls of, you know, what we should do and stuff like that.
We'll flip an 18-wheeler, and if you say no, I'll make it a train.
I will grab a 747 jetliner and crash it into that stupid hangar if I have to. And times it does get him in trouble, which I think we'll talk about. And it does sometimes come off a little bit pretentious,
tacky,
to say the least. There are definitely times where I'm listening to him in interviews, and I'm like, I understand where you're coming from, and it's good-hearted. You know, it's not like I hate just everything wrong with. You know, there's everything wrong with Hollywood. It's actual like thought and just a general. Fearfulness of the industry, I think he has, of where it's going, especially. But I can see why that turns people off. But for me, I've just appreciated him over the years just because he just makes just fun movies, just really good fun movies that you can either take it at a surface level or you can search for deeper meaning behind it and you can still be rewarded. It rewards rewatches. It almost requires them. Yeah.
Some of them require rewatches.
To a degree. You kind of have to watch, like, Inception, I don't think I fully understood till maybe the third time. And I still don't understand at times. Tenet, I've watched twice, and it still freaks me out.
That's understandable.
But, like, watching The Dark Knight, there are just little minute details that I'm like, I didn't pick that up the first time. Or like little things he does, you know, behind the scenes, behind the camera, where I'm like, that's crazy that I'm still picking up little cookie crumbs 15 years later. So to me, that's always what I've appreciated the most. And I think that's also what people appreciate the most. And that's not to say he doesn't have his flaws. He definitely does. We'll get into them. But he is my favorite working director. It's like him or Scorsese.
One thing that I appreciate about Nolan, I really like when movies not just have a story and then have a theme on top of it, but try to take their theme and moral and actually dramatize it through the plot and the story. And lots of great filmmakers do that. I appreciate Nolan because his themes are like time and quantum physics and things that it would seem, how could you possibly turn it into a narrative story? And he is so hell-bent on doing it every single time.
To a fault.
Yeah. It is an obsession of his, which I think we both know is a massive theme of his throughout all of his films.
Film bros would rather go to film. Film bros would rather make a film than go to therapy.
Film might be his therapy at that point. But really nobody else is willing to, I mean, you have to not only be interested in those fields of science to begin with, and I think few people who are in the film are also into that. So I appreciate that he is willing to bridge the gaps, even if he does it in a blockbuster setting. There is every Christopher Nolan film could have been the most esoteric art house, like just Criterion schlock that you could possibly imagine it could be. But he aims for multi-million-dollar budget, almost 4-quadrant, like summer blockbuster. And I still wish that he would just kind of reel it back a little bit.
I think he's the one director that's been able to blend both show and business the best, at least within the past 20 to 25 years.
Yeah.
Because guys like Fincher, PTA, Tarantino, I would argue Tarantino's gone more show or kind of more business away because he's kind of becoming like a AI chat GPT version of himself.
I think,
but like PTA and Fincher are definitely more
yeah.
like, I'm gonna do whatever I want. I don't care if
Yeah.
it makes money. I'll sign a 4-year, $200 million deal with, Amazon, Netflix, Hulu, whoever.
I think Ridley Scott is a better example of somebody who's got more business than show.
That's another one, yeah. Hopefully, Napoleon.
Hopefully, Napoleon is.
Napoleon is his return to form.
I learned Napoleon is a separate film from the Stanley Kubrick idea.
Yes.
That was going to be a HBO miniseries. I got put on hold. This is going to be.
Oh, you thought he was adapting?
I thought he was doing Stanley Kubrick's
okay,
Napoleon,
okay,
and I was like, oh my god.
Okay.
Not happening. Excitement for the movie
Just
plummeted.
a quick editor's note on our last podcast.
Yeah.
Or two podcasts ago. But I think he's done it the best. I mean, obviously, you can't make a bad movie that doesn't impact people and the culture and still make, $2 billion movies. And yet people are still talking about him to this day. I mean, the Dark Knight trilogy is the definitive trilogy of at least our generation.
Yeah.
Definitely of the late 2000s in the like area, like that late 2000s, early 2010s, that area of filmmaking. It's the definitive action trilogy, probably the definitive film trilogy of that time. And it's like people's Star Wars, it's their.
Is it our Godfather? Great first movie, God tier second film, less so third film.
yeah. That's a good. It's a good way. Or like the Terminator for trilogy.
Yeah.
That's another good one.
Trilogy, quartet. How many Terminator films are there?
I stopped counting after 3. I stopped caring about them after 3.
Or our Alien.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another. That's another one. But
one other thing about Nolan too, I'll bring up. And this will be before we dive into his films. I think what not a lot of people give him credit for. So, whenever Nolan makes a film, people immediately bring up, we're excited because we like practical effects more than we like CGI.
Right.
And
like we are excited, or like
audiences will get online and they'll go to Twitter and they say, finally practical effects, no CGI fest here.
Gotcha.
Why can't we get more practical effects in all these films? And I've never worked with Nolan. I've never seen behind the scenes in any of his films. But I think there's a reason why he gets to use practical effects and other directors don't. Not just because, the other directors want to do CG, maybe because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
But
it's less of a hassle.
And there is a massive risk involved in practical effects across the board, especially the stunts that he is having to pull off too. Yeah. And Nolan has, with films like the Batman, right? Batman trilogy, Dark Knight, and Inception, basically those films alone proved he could do it. It's always going to be a risk. I can't imagine what the insurance policies could take.
Yeah.
Things.
Leo, sign this $25 million policy real quick.
Just real quick. Have this drink first and then sign it. But there's, from a studio's perspective, he's a safe bet to do that, or at least he knows what he's doing. In the same way that I think if you were going to do motion capture, you would want James Cameron or Neil Blomkamp, because they just understand that better than other people. Nolan just gets his practical effects. Yeah. And that's not to say that he hasn't used CGI ever. He absolutely has.
Yes.
But just so that audience members know this, asking for practical effects in every action film is
that's basically how you ensure we get like 2 movies.
Yeah.
Because not only is it a big money thing, but it's also, or like you said, like a big expertise thing. I guess. It's just space and time. We have to take time out of our shooting schedule to set. Like, I mean, you go look at the behind the scenes of Inception, the rotating hotel room. Yeah, that takes up a whole hangar. Yeah, that is massive. So, like, and to have the patience and the time and just also the expertise to know like, hey, this is what we need to do.
Yeah.
Not everybody can do it, which is why, I mean, he's the best at it.
Yeah.
At least of working directors right now.
Yeah. And then when it comes to stunts too, it would be a union problem with stunt actors being in SAG because it's like back in the day, nobody cared if you fell off the bridge. You're a stunt actor, right? That's your job. And now it's like
people are dying.
Like
2 people die.
We should
a
actually
year.
probably take care of you guys now.
It's like you guys actually do matter.
It's a little bit to ask, I think. Not that I don't appreciate practical effects. Just saying, there's a reason I think Nolan has that cornered off compared to every other director. I want to throw that out there. He's the master at it.
It's his bread and butter. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Let's do it.
Where are we going to start?
Are we going to start at the end?
We can start at the end and work backwards? We can do that.
Or how about I start with following and you go Tenet and we just meet in the middle?
That's perfect. All right. Go ahead.
Following. You've seen this one, right?
Yes.
Yes, we have.
Yes.
We've seen them all. It is a first...
it is a first film.
It is the first film.
No, it is a first film.
It is also a first film. Yeah, he did a lot of shorts at his time in uni. But this was his first feature film. Filmed it on the weekends, which I don't know if many people knew that. It took him like, what did we say it was? Like a year or something like that to film?
Yeah, I think he filmed it he only filmed it on weekends because all of the cast and crew just had jobs.
Yeah.
They were just doing this on their own.
Because the budget for this was like $5,000 or something
in
ridiculously
pounds,
low. Yeah,
6,000 pounds.
Yeah,
so
and that's the '90s too. So it's
yeah,
but it's definitely a first film. It's not the greatest debut, and I would honestly not fault anybody for either not wanting to watch this or just not considering it his first film, because it's definitely a elongated student short film that just so happens to be, I think it's like an hour 10 or something like that. But that being said, my favorite thing to do when watching people's first films or very early in their career is seeing what techniques, what themes, stuff like that, stuff that they like, little trademarks that directors hit. And almost every single one of Nolan's trademark is right here. It's non-linear. Okay, he uses he's on locations. Confuses the hell out of you.
Yeah.
There is a sharp sense of where to put cameras at all times. That I think it's very rough. But it's there. He's learning along the way about where can I put cameras to basically tell the story the best way possible.
There's a love interest.
There's a love interest. There is spotty dialogue. But all in all, not bad for a first feature. I will say that. I think we both gave it like a C tier the first time around. By the way, just to let you guys know, we did not go back and listen to the first time. Don't implore you to
we won't compare anything.
We don't implore you to do the same. So if you guys watch the first one and watching this one and we hit on some same subjects, apologies in advance. But yeah.
What would you rate it now?
I mean, I would still give it a C.
Still give it a C?
Yeah. It's entertaining. It's short. It's very quickly paced, which is another thing that he does so well. Is he just goes scene to scene without any kind of
no explanation,
establishment or explanation. He's just like, all right, you're in a basement, boom, now you're like in Hong Kong, and we're like, whoa, when did this, but yeah,
I think that's a good point. It's definitely for completionists. I think Nolan completionists, but. Like we said, every one of all of his little quirks are right there just at the beginning. They just don't have the budget to get out.
Yeah.
Speaking of budgets, Tenet.
Well, let me ask you this before we move on.
Go ahead.
You're a studio executive in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. you just watched Following. Somebody, an assistant said, "Hey, here's this.
Mm-hmm.
What about this do you think causes an assistant or a studio executive to be like, I'll sign off on that when he comes and does the next film?"
It would be the fact that he paid for it himself.
Just the sheer,
like this guy's gonna get something done.
I need to do it.
Yeah.
Just the
grit.
All right, respectable.
That's what I would say as the executive. Because, I mean, that's all filmmaking is from a directing point of view, is you're just taking on risk.
Yeah.
I mean, especially to self-produce your own film and then to be able to complete it and then market it. I think that's just a good quality for a director to have, is to be able to say, well, now you're taking on somebody else's money. Now we know that you can at least finish something when it was your own money that was on the line.
Yeah.
Maybe, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. Or maybe he just got a really good pitch. All right. Tenet came out in 2020, or right in the middle of the pandemic. But it was still in theaters.
Still in theaters. I went to go see it in theaters.
Did you see it in IMAX?
I did.
Did you see it?
I did. I paid for the IMAX, paid for the
Nice.
full experience. If you watch a Nolan film, you got to do it all. At least once. You got to go all the way.
So this one stars John David Washington as well as Robert Pattinson in a supporting role.
In his renaissance.
Mm-hmm.
This is like beginning of his renaissance.
Of his, yeah.
Because I think Good Time came out, what was it, the year or two before?
Yeah, that's right. It was his independent.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know if Tenet would count as an independent film actually at this point. This movie also stars, of course, Michael Caine. We will see him
very
shortly in the past. This also stars Kenneth Branagh in one of his most flattering roles, I think, as a Russian.
The iconic Kenneth Branagh.
Yeah.
Branagh.
Doing as good a Russian accent as I think we're ever going to get. So I only watched this film once. It was notoriously very confusing, notoriously very difficult to hear. I was surprised to learn both of those facts after I watched it.
That it was hard to hear?
That it was hard to hear and confusing to follow.
I thought that too, because the audio mix. Okay, so I went into it. I watched it in IMAX, watched it at home. Both fine both times. I was reading up on it, and apparently he just stopped caring for regular movie theaters.
That's understandable. Yeah.
So he mixes it for the IMAX theaters, and then I guess when they go for the DVD release, somebody just goes in and cleans it up.
That's understandable.
So I lucked out. I didn't have any dialogue issues.
That's probably why seeing it on streaming, it was probably the DVD remaster of it.
Yeah.
So, what's funny too is for Oppenheimer, he was like, "Yeah, I've heard the complaints. I don't care." I'm like, more power to you, man. More power to you. So this film is about a man who
The protagonist.
You gotta
make sure
right.
you tell him the.
Doesn't have his name. He gets involved in the mission that goes all different sorts of places, from Russian mafia members to back in time to an actual fight scene that happens both backwards and forwards at the same time. It is really confusing. It's one of those things where if you kind of turn your brain off, you'll get it. You'll just absorb the information. But when you really look back at it, this film is probably the worst example of Nolan's habit of having subplots explained in such detail that they feel like they're a part of the main story when they aren't. This movie goes so many places, from talking about like nuclear weapons, or at least like plutonium, to crashing airplanes, to how the actual like forwards and backwards reverse stuff works, to like the pills that these people are after. And none of that really has to do with the story, but it all gets explained in such detail that it feels important when it's not. Nolan just wants you to know all this stuff because he knows it.
It is the most Nolan movie.
Yeah.
Of all.
It is the most Nolan
the
movie
highs
possible.
are really high, right? The action sequences are amazing. It's a wonderful score. It's shot really beautifully.
Mm-hmm. The fact that they had to learn how to run backwards and speak backwards.
Yeah. And fight. There's a fight scene where both backwards. Actors are like, yeah.
That's just crazy.
Stuff like that. What else? The editing is one of one. It's amazing. But then it's 45-minute exposition dumps.
Yeah.
Love stories that don't make any sense. Characters that fall flat to a degree. One-dimensional characters at that.
Yeah.
And just stuff that just frankly doesn't make sense at times. And a lot of plot holes that are like, that doesn't need to exist.
Which I think only really comes from him over-explaining everything anyway. Sure. Which is such an interesting leap from Following. Because when you look at Following and you're like, he doesn't really explain what's going on. You just have to learn through the character's action. And now you jump ahead to Tenet, and it's like, are these characters going to do anything, or are they just going to continue explaining everything that they do?
I feel like he was like that up until Inception.
I feel like...
where he let the audience figure out what was going on, and that was kind of the fun of it was like the mystery.
That's true. That's fair.
What is happening? And then I think Inception, it got a little too complex.
Yeah.
Or he at least thought it got a little too complex for the audience. So that's when he started to... He kept the level of complexity, but he eroded the mystery behind the world, right? Which you can argue either way. I personally enjoy, I rewatched Memento for this. I enjoy trying to piece together the puzzle as we went along. I can see why some audience members would not like that. For me personally, I enjoy it because when it clicks, you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
It's one of the greatest feelings
when it comes together.
You can watch it when you watch a movie.
And Tenet has that moment too towards the end where the forwards and backwards coalesce together. Yes. And it's like when that clicks, you're like, that's really cool. There's still a story going on outside of that, however. I actually think that this might be one of the worst examples of him failing to fully incorporate his ideas into the plot of the story. Feels like there are just too much at once, and so many of those ideas are repeats from what he has done in the past, which, of course, we will talk about in the future. That being said, though, I think I gave this a B when we first reviewed it.
I believe so, yeah. Because I remember I was surprised that you gave it so high.
Yeah, I think there was so much of it that it just felt more like a normal action film than it did like a normal. Like all of the sci-fi hand-waving for all the exposition dumps, the stiff acting and performances, it just felt like a normal action film, which is different from what we get with Nolan in the past. This film was, I think, a lot sleeker than his other stuff, for sure. This one, he also works with Hoyt Van Hoytema.
It's their third time together.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is when they're starting to
they're really
starting to hit their stride together.
Yeah, for sure.
Because Dunkirk and Interstellar, not to jump the gun a little bit, but those are really beautifully shot films. But this one is from the jump. It's a different beast.
Different feeling, for sure. And I think just the fact that it stands out among his other films, both as it's a good example of his collaborations, but a poor example of his storytelling.
Yeah.
That's how I would rate it. And I think just because I liked Nolan, I think I gave it a B. That being said, I might give it a C now, especially if I rewatched it. Not to say that this is The Following is not a bad film, I should say, but it definitely has its flaws, and this film definitely also has its flaws too. So I think I would give this a C now.
Yeah.
But also knowing what Robert Pattinson became,
just makes it so much better. Now, right?
I think So maybe that's worth it.
He was going to be in Oppenheimer, but I guess Nolan said that he's very busy these days.
That was Batman. He didn't want to reference that there was another Batman.
Yeah,
movie,
probably right.
How would you rate Tenet today?
I think I gave it a B. It's still, to me, it's still a very fun action movie. There are sequences.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
This is in the trailer, so no spoilers. but when both sides shoot at the building in the final fight, it's one of the ultimate WTF moments that I've ever experienced in a theater.
For sure.
So that was a cool scene, and then there's another scene, the car scene, when they have to, they're in the middle of the street, and they're one car's going backwards and one car's going forward, and they're fighting across the cars.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That scene was really, because I remember watching the behind the scenes of that and being like, "What the hell is Nolan doing?" And then to see it on this big screen, it was kind of like, just like, "Whoa, this is cool."
That's nice. Yeah, there's definitely this movie survives purely on, this movie gets to be purely on the rule of cool. I think. Yeah. That's how this movie survives among everything else.
But I don't fault anybody for not liking this one. It's definitely his most divisive.
Especially if you couldn't hear anything.
Yeah. It's his most divisive film for sure. But I don't know. I enjoyed it, even though I do have problems with it. I mean, I bought it in 4K for crying out loud.
All right. Now let's jump ahead and go back to 2000.
This is my favorite Al Pacino performance.
You're gonna skip? Didn't Memento come out?
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding.
I was like, he wasn't in Memento. I was just reading about Pacino.
Memento. I think is the film that started to
solidify,
if not for audiences, at least for studio executives and for the really diehard cinema heads out there.
Yeah,
because you said your dad at the time. Right? Was it your dad was like,
yeah?
Who was this Nolan guy?
He was teaching. He was in film school, and all the students were talking about Memento at the time. And he was like, "All right, I guess I got to check this out now. Like, if it captures the attentions of film students at that time, then it has to be something like new and original." And new and original. This movie
was definitely new and original.
Yeah.
The use of non-linear storytelling is just amplified to the nth degree in this movie. It is one of the coolest, for nothing more than the construction. It is one of the coolest movies out there. Just the fact that you have one going this way, one going that way, but like we also started in the middle.
Yeah,
and we're also ending the movie in the middle. One of the coolest things ever. And the ability to write it's a generic plot, it's a generic narrative. It's just it's just a revenge story.
Yeah,
but
pretty much.
The wherewithal to understand his narrative and to layer it in a way to where it doesn't get too confusing. Yeah. And you can still somewhat follow it. Is impressive.
Yeah. But it's also not just a cool idea, but it is his way of dramatizing the amnesia that the Guy Pearce suffers from in the film.
You feel like you have amnesia watching this.
You have no idea what's coming next.
So, but I think it's one of the more impressive movies. Yeah, for sure. I've seen this, I think, a handful of times now. I think like 3 or 4. And just every time I watch it, I'm just
enamored.
Yeah, just because it's so 2000s, or it is in the 2000s, but it's so just out of left field to do something like this. And it's really cool. Did you ever watch the cut where they show the whole thing?
No.
In sequential order?
No, I've never seen that before. It seems interesting.
I wonder if it would be interesting.
Huh. That's curious. Yeah, I feel like the thing with Memento, though, is the story structure is so compelling that it sometimes overrides the rest of the film. Very few people, I think, even like would point to Guy Pearce in this film and just say like, "Oh, Memento, that's a good Guy Pearce film." It's like, no, Memento, that's the crazy ass freaking black and white backwards film.
Yeah.
And so to a certain extent, I feel like Memento really caught people's attention for that reason more than anything. And Christopher Nolan probably needed that to happen. I don't want to say that he might have known this. People have often talked about Nolan as not really being a good director of actors. And I feel like the fact that the film that really skyrocketed his career was and is best known for the structure of the story and nothing else within it speaks volumes to just where his attention lies.
Because to Nolan, the action is the juice.
Yeah.
To quote our favorite movie, one of our favorite movies.
Yeah. Everything comes down to, like, I had a point and I forgot how I was going to word it. But, you know, the concept of the film is almost more important than, say, getting a good performance out of this character over here or having a perfectly, you know, beautifully framed, you know, view of the sunset in this shot over here. He kind of glosses over some of those finer details of filmmaking that I think some people are perfectionists about. Yeah. But for him, it's just about the end content that you get when you look at the whole film. So it's totally understandable, I think, why the nonlinear story would impress itself on everybody's mind the most out of everything. But I think this movie is an A on its own, just even if you look at, say, the soundtrack or the acting. Because, I mean, I don't know what order they possibly could have shot this film in, but Guy Pearce, I think, does a great job embodying not only the utter confusion, but the then recognition and pursuit of revenge that the character goes through every other scene. I think that there's a lot more in this film than I think some people might give it credit for, personally.
This is when you start to realize, Nolan, to go on your tidbit about he does not a good character actor, it's when you realize that Nolan just doesn't, he would rather evoke emotion out of the experience plot or the experience of discovering something or seeing something for the first time, you know, whether that makes you shocked or sad or happy or weird, whatever feeling you feel,
as opposed to just the character expressing emotion.
It's not this is not The Godfather Part 2, Michael and Fredo in Cuba. This is I'm going to confuse the hell out of you for 2 hours, and then these last 5 minutes you're going to be like, what just happened? And he does that time and time and again. Yep. It's like what he does. It's just, for better or worse, his characters are going to be one-dimensional throughout his career. And I think we both have mentioned many problems that we have with that at times. But for a movie like this, where you don't even need, 3D characters, I think it services it perfectly.
All right. So, jumping ahead again, we're gonna get to. Oh, where would you rank Memento? I still think it's a good A.
I'd give it an A.
Yeah. All right. Dunkirk, 2017. My apologies. This is the most pride for Britain Nolan has ever showed outside of casting Michael Caine and everything. This is about, of course, the Dunkirk evacuation from France back to England. Yeah. People, not just soldiers or people in the British military, but people who had boats took across the English Channel and helped evacuate these soldiers who were stranded at Dunkirk. This movie stars among many, many, many people. Tom Hardy.
This is a very ensemble, but like
not ensemble.
1990s high school day slice of life type of ensemble cast.
Pretty much, yeah. Really, the other big standout for me is Harry Styles.
When Harry Styles is in your movie for 30 minutes.
Yeah,
and he's the only one people talk about.
Yeah,
that's how you know this cast is kind of low on them. I guess Tom Hardy.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything really wrong with having a cast of just like smaller in terms of not as well known British actors, and then throwing Harry Styles in with them as well. Sure. Tom Hardy, of course, since he kind of has his own scene on his own, he has his own storyline. stands out the most among all of them, except for Kenneth Branagh, who he will work with in the future in Tenet.
I think we might end up confusing everybody else.
I'm having fun with it. I don't know.
No, I love it. I love it.
So this movie, also a collaboration with Hoyt van Hoytema. Also
His
shot.
second.
It is his second. Also shot on IMAX as well.
Mm-hmm.
Also uses a number of practical effects for all of the boats and aerial fight scenes. And all the people. Boy, are there a lot of them. So I have still only seen this movie once. And I still remember great swaths of it. And I remember not getting the structure at first.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's on me. I think the structure of this film is presented in a way that is a lot more straightforward than some of his other films when he comes to messing with time, of course. But the fact that you have one sequence that's taking place over the course of, what is it, like a day?
It's a week, a day, an hour.
A week, a day, and an hour, yeah. But because he's cutting back and forth between all of them, they feel like they're simultaneous, even though you know that they're happening across multiple time frames. And I think that just really, I didn't get that at first when I watched it. I think I just glossed over the titles when he introduced each one of them.
Yeah, you're like, oh, that's artsy. He's telling us it's an hour. And then you're like, wait a minute. It actually is supposed to be an hour.
To be fair, I have only seen this film once, and it was in South Korea.
Yeah.
So I had a language disadvantage going into it.
Sure.
But
you were trying to go back to English.
Yeah. Yeah. Try my best. But nevertheless, I think by the end of this film, when all of the narratives coalesced at the end, and you got the when Tom Hardy comes in and he lands on the beach, I think I ended with a film that, in my personal opinion, was his weakest in terms of the action and the big spectacle set pieces.
Yeah.
Definitely tried to rely a lot more on just having it's hard to say this is character driven because they're all just soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were not like going into their personal.
The character is it's the spirit of Britain.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Which of course it would be like Nolan to make a character piece about something that is ephemeral and not an actual person.
Not a character.
Yeah. But good on him. I don't know. I think this one just didn't really land that hard for me.
It's not a war movie.
Not a war movie.
It is a thriller. It is a anxiety.
I think it's almost more like just a historical drama.
Action piece. It's not Saving Private Ryan. This is not. Mm-hmm. And I think, to me, that makes it more impressive. Because not only did this movie make a lot of money, but people liked it. The Academy liked it. Oh, yeah. Everybody liked it. And when we have been watching Saving Private Ryan remakes since 1998,
since it came out.
For someone to just say, you know what, we're going to flip it. We're going to do something else. We're going to focus more on just the resilience of these soldiers in this country, I think is very impressive. Not my favorite war movie. I'll say that much. But it is a nice and crisp 106 minutes, which I think is his first. I think it's his second shortest
film.
It's his shortest movie. But that's good because it's just fast paced, and you don't from the jump you don't feel like you feel just in a race, really, and a lot of that is accentuated by Hans Zimmer's score.
Yeah,
the ticking of the clock in the back, just the ferocity that it brings at times, where it's like stuff like that,
or the optical, there's like an actual audio illusion within the score itself that he employed that gives a weird like anxiety
It
inducing
rises
effect.
and it
And
like
falls at the
rises
same
and
time.
falls, and then it all blends together scene to scene, which he'll do in numerous films when we get there in the past. But he it's a really good Hans Zimmer score.
I definitely think that in terms of editing, this is one of Nolan's peaks. For in my opinion, this was edited by Lee Smith, who, let's see here, has worked with him since The Dark Knight. No, since Batman Begins. That was an incorrect statement. So somebody who I think really gets Nolan's style, and I think that this was just a better example of his like 3-scene intercutting. The fact that he had the whole space of the film to do that, I think really gave a better breathing, how do I want to phrase this? It's well edited. I'm going to leave it at that. Figure out what
Lee Smith, he's a really good editor.
Oh, yeah.
Spoiler alert.
He's worked with him, I believe, since Batman Begins.
Correct. He did not work with him on Tenet.
Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, we will be continuing to talk about him for just about every other film from here on out, because I think that he does a good job. And where would you rank Dunkirk?
I give it an A.
A?
Yeah.
I think I would give it a B. In my opinion, I still there's a special Nolan sauce that's just missing from it a little bit for me. Maybe that's because I'm just so used to him doing action films at this point that to get something a little more.
It was a palate cleanser, and
that's a good one.
It was his second most divisive film until Tenet came along. Just took that throne, kicked it in the face, and has since had that throne ever since. But I do remember there being mixed feelings, at least on the internet, about this movie. Just because I think people were expecting Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
And when it wasn't. Like, the biggest complaint I've heard is, there's not 100,000 people on that beach. It's like, well, when you're...
why didn't you go join them?
When the worst problem of the film that you're saying is there's not 100,000 people on a beach, I think the director's doing a pretty good job. I'm just saying, like...
Yeah.
I don't know. I think you guys are thinking a little too deep into it. But I can acknowledge that it's not for everybody. It's definitely not everybody's war film.
I think I have a hard time talking about it because I haven't really thought about it since I've seen it, because it's just kind of been like, not what I thought it would be.
Yeah.
But, good enough, I think. I definitely think that if you wanted to introduce someone to Christopher Nolan, I think this would be a good one, because it's not as like super conceptual as some of his biggest blockbusters are, but it's not a comic book film, which would turn people off in the day of Marvel, and it's not one of his earlier independent films, but it's just as entertaining as all the other ones. So I think this would be a good introduction for non-Nolan fans.
Very lean, especially, the runtime obviously doesn't hurt either. I think I watched it, like twice in one time.
Dang.
Because I watched it in the morning.
Oh, that's right.
Somebody else,
about that,
somebody else wanted to watch it. When it first came out, I did watch it 4 times in theaters, 2 of which I paid for. So I also watched this one in 70 millimeter.
Nice.
Which was a wonderful, wonderful experience. I recommend everybody do that for any Nolan movie.
All right.
But this was a fun one. Now I move on to my favorite Al Pacino performance of all time.
Let's move ahead back to the past.
This is my least favorite of his. I'll just say right now.
So is it your favorite Pacino performance and your least favorite Nolan film?
We just need Nolan to do Godfather 4 before Pacino goes.
Yeah.
No, it definitely is my least favorite Nolan. It's just so weird looking on his discography.
His filmography.
Filmography. I don't know why I kept saying that. It's just out of normal, but it's the classic. There's this young director. We have this screenplay. Let's give him something and see what he can do with it. This is his first.
Greta and Barbie.
Exactly. This is his first studio film. from one of the big studios at least. So it's just Warner Brothers saying like, "Hey, we're in talent acquisition mode.
Yeah.
Let's get talent. Let's see what this guy can do."
Let's give him 2 pretty big named actors.
Yeah.
Al Pacino and Robin Williams in a drama.
Really surprising Robin Williams' performance.
Comedians in serious films. They nail it every single time. Every time.
It's almost like comedians are good actors.
Yeah. Almost except for when they're in comedies.
Yeah. True. I don't know. I don't really have much to say about this one, to be honest with you. I think we spent too much time the last time
trying to wrap our heads around it.
And it just was a weird... I mean, I understand why he did it. Obviously, it's a big career move to have a $46 million budget and to work with 2 established titans in the industry. I think I've seen this once or twice, and it's just a run-of-the-mill crime drama.
You know, I think one of the things that we touched on in our old podcast was the fact that it's a remake feels so out of line.
Yeah.
For Nolan, which it might have been just a studio mandate, like, hey, we'll take you on. Now you got to do this. He's like, all right, I'll do it. Fine, whatever. Not written by him. Not
or his brother.
Or his brother. Not an original idea.
Yeah.
I think it's just we'll give you money. This is the one where the studio executive is like, oh, you'll pay for your own stuff? All right. Now you're using our money and our actors.
You're going to make
so don't mess this up.
This is one for hire. This is his one for hire.
Yeah.
Which every director has done at some point or another, except for, I think, Quentin. I think he's the only one who's been like, nah, I just do whatever I want.
Or Paul Thomas Anderson.
Yeah.
Pretty much. But, you know, I think this film works better if you are interested in seeing I almost think of this film in terms of Robin Williams more than I do Christopher Nolan. I think if you just love Robin Williams and you just want to see a good out there drama performance by him, that's what I would recommend this film to, more so than I would anybody who was interested in Nolan. This is the Nolan completionist film. If somebody says they've seen Insomnia, you know that
that's how you know they're legit.
Yeah, they went looking for this film. It didn't come to them.
Yeah. It probably 2 of his best performances from actors, I would say.
Yeah.
It's a really, really good Hilary Swank performance as well. Shout out to Hilary Swank. But in terms of his trademark and his stamp, there's almost nothing there. I mean, there's like weird lens flares here and there, and like when Pacino is freaking out because he's like 16 hours and no sleep.
It tries to have, it tries to use the insomnia of Al Pacino's character as an element in its story, but it's just too much of a straight cut and dry detective thriller, basically. Yeah. So I don't know. I think I gave this a C. Well, I might have given it a B, honestly. I did not hate this film that much when I first watched it. I just think it's the black sheep of his filmography, for sure. So,
I give it a C.
I might still stick with a B, maybe a C, but that's just me personally. It really is one where it's like, even if I met somebody who was another Nolan fan and they were like, oh, Insomnia, what do you think about it? I'd be like,
why'd you do that to yourself?
Yeah. What do you think about it? What is there to think about it?
Is there anything to grasp from that?
Yeah.
No, not really.
Yeah. Because it doesn't really stand out in terms of like Al Pacino's career either. Yeah. Especially when you look back and you think, oh my God, Christopher Nolan is one of the biggest directors now. He worked with Al Pacino. Nobody talks about this film at all. It only really stands out because Robin Williams is just fantastic in his like more serious roles.
It's not even Al Pacino's best role as a cop.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
fair point.
It even has that not going for it.
Fair point. All right. We'll scoot right along. We'll take a hop, skip, and a jump through a wormhole.
And a black hole. Connor, I hope you're still watching. This was for you, Connor.
So, 2014, Nolan releases the movie Interstellar, starring Matthew McConaughey, Jessica Chastain, Guy Pearce. He's in here too.
Guy Pearce.
And Michael Caine. I think with the exception of Inception, this is, not including the Dark Knight films, this is the Nolan film for most people.
Yes.
I think
Well, people like the Batman because it's Batman.
Yeah. And I think, too, a lot of general audiences might just kind of, they don't really think of the Dark Knight because they just see it as comic book movies.
Yeah, it's a machine on its own.
Yeah.
Correct.
Whereas I feel like Inception and Interstellar is really where the conversation holds itself. And I think Interstellar is probably a peak performance Christopher Nolan, in my opinion. There's
second peak, if you will.
Second peak, if you will. Well, third peak, possibly even.
Yeah.
I think that this is, there are elements of Christopher Nolan's filmmaking that I appreciate that I don't get with other directors. And I feel like this film doesn't have those elements. And to a certain extent, I think I appreciate that about this film too. Because it's like, all right, now here's somebody who I feel like is tightening all the screws on what we got in the past. His first collaboration with Hoyt van Hoytema, we got there eventually. We're back at the beginning. Also shot on IMAX as well.
Yes.
You will notice that will be a pattern in the past that we have already talked about. This is about a test pilot who gets the chance to go on a mission to find a new planet for people to live on. They have to travel through a wormhole in order to get there, and then he has to travel back home to let everybody know about what they find. And this film is notable for, I think, two reasons. This film stands out, possibly even three. I'm going to say three reasons. The first reason is that Nolan worked with physicists in the production of this film to create the visual effects. He's known for his practical effects. Space is really difficult to go to in order to do your practical effects shot. So this used a lot of projection, a lot of stuff here on Earth. But the dark hole that is featured in this film was based off of actual math given to him by physicists.
There was no pictures of black holes prior to this movie being made.
And yet the accuracy that they managed to acquire predicted what the black hole would actually look like.
When we had our friend Connor here, when he watched it, he was like, wait, when did this movie come out?
Yeah.
We were like 2014. He's like, oh shit, they didn't even have pictures of it yet, huh? We were like, no.
Yeah. They plugged the numbers in and they were like, oh, that's what a black hole looks like. Yeah. Cool. And then they took a picture of a black hole, and that was what it looked like.
The one rule, who was it? Kip Thorne, that gave him was, you can do whatever you want. I'll even let you have fire in space.
That's funny.
But it has to be founded based on physics. I think was his one rule. So with that, Nolan was like, all right, let's get to work. And everything science related. Not to say that love does not transcend time, because we don't know. It's unquantifiable. Thank you, Anne Hathaway. But all of that is based in real life physics and math and science, which I think just amplifies it to the nth degree. Yeah. When you take that into account, because it's one thing to make a movie, and we've talked about this with my favorite thing about Pacific Rim, which is, this is a weird tangent, but let me get there. Favorite thing about Pacific Rim is that it feels weighty to it, and there's actual motion and physics assigned to these giant creatures, which I think a lot of action movies kind of just gloss over. They're just like, yo, I'm just going to throw this dude through a window. It's like, yeah, you can do that, but can we do it in a way that looks and feels real, right? Which is, I think, is another problem I have with a lot of post Dark Knight DC movies. Yeah. Is that there's no tangibleness to the action going on. Getting back to Interstellar, the use of that and the insistence on real life weight just makes everything so much more dramatic when you're like, whoa, he just aged like 7 million years.
Well, I think I'm trying to think what really captured general audiences about this film, because I think that there's kind of been this, like, obviously when science comes down to the masses, it gets filtered through, you know, headlines that might not really understand the math behind anything or the implications of anything. It's just, hey, here's this cool thing that science discovered. There you go. Yeah. And so things like black holes, the fourth dimension, wormholes, that's all out there, but people just read about it. They don't really sit on it or try to conceptualize it themselves. So to see a film like Interstellar and see, oh, that's what a wormhole would be like. That's what a black hole actually looks like. What does the fourth dimension look like? Here's my interpretation of it. I feel like those elements would make up the second thing that I think really caught this film, made it one of his most successful blockbusters of his career, in my opinion. This is not the most money he's ever made on return on investment, but
definitely not.
This is one of those films where I feel like the people who have seen it, like, it almost like leaves an impression on them, whether they like it or hate it. Connor, nevertheless, how would you rate this film?
This is when he becomes the franchise,
like
trademark.
His name,
TM trademark.
Christopher Nolan trademark,
the franchise. Because this is post Batman. He's no longer in a machine.
Yeah.
This is an original idea. I think it's not based on any short story or anything like that. Yeah, no. Nope. This is just him. It's just I'm making a science fiction movie. This is my 2001 A Space Odyssey. I'm starring Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway, which probably helps it out of why people were so captivated by it. Because this is the McConaissance.
Is that what it's called?
The McConaissance. But
we're gonna do a podcast on that.
I can't wait for Magic Mike. No, but this is just him becoming the man of Hollywood at this point, and he is the hottest working director at this point in time, at least. There's a debate for post this, obviously, but it is top 2.
Oh yeah,
it's one of my favorites.
It is when Nolan tries to take his science and turn it into a story, this is probably the best that he has ever done.
Yeah. And
I also think that when that story involves an amount of spectacle that would require a $100 million budget, this is probably the best that he has done in a while.
It's really well paced. It goes quick for a almost 3-hour long movie.
Yeah.
It is a wonderful score, probably my favorite score of all time. I love the soundtrack.
That would be, in my opinion, the third thing that I think this film really captured people's attention.
It has stood the test of time. It is a beautiful piece of work.
Oh, yeah.
It is, I think, Hans Zimmer, himself has even said this is my favorite score I've ever done.
That's understandable.
He has performed it when he goes on tour. He performs it all the time. People go crazy for it.
Hey, I think people who play the piano in subways and out in public would also agree that this is
it is an iconic piece of music. I think it has really two wonderful leads in Anne Hathaway and Matthew McConaughey. I think it's Anne Hathaway for sure, her best performance. I don't know, Devil Wears Prada's pretty close. But Matthew McConaughey, it's up there. Like I said, this is his come to form. He's coming back to serious drama, or is beginning to go into serious drama, I should say. And it's space, man. Like, what? It's space is cool.
Yeah. I also think that this movie is a good example, and I know that when we did our old podcast, we talked about this. I think that Interstellar is a great example of Nolan's ability to make individual standout moments in his films. That it's not just enough that things are blowing up and they look awesome. It's that the story being told through those things blowing up are so well intertwined with each other that you're on the edge of your seat, not just because the thing that's happening is really engaging, but what could happen, what is going to happen. I mean, just the scene where he is trying to dock the spaceship into the other
That is my favorite scene in movies. That scene single-handedly wanted me to start making movies.
Yeah,
I watched it junior year physics class. My teacher put it on. It was the end of the year, so we had like 2 weeks left. He's like, "You guys want to watch a movie?" We were like, "Yeah." He's like, "All right, I got this movie." He put on Interstellar.
Nice.
I think at that point it had been up for like 6 months, and we watched it, and I was blown away. It's one of the greatest experiences I've ever had watching a movie. That specific scene where he's like, "I'm docking." I'm like, "What is going on?"
That one is one of those too where it's like you'll find YouTube videos of people reacting to it for the first time. And you're like, no, I have to watch that just to be like, I will experience this for the first time through showing it to other people.
It's the one movie that I love showing people because just their experience of going, WTF? I love it. It's a wonderful twist at the end. It's such a beautiful, emotional film. It tells a story about love, even though that can get a little heavy-handed, especially when Anne Hathaway decides she's King Lear or something and goes on a monologue.
Well, I think Nolan decided for her. Nolan and his brother.
Yeah, I can't speak enough good things about this movie. It is.
I know this is his fourth to last film so far, but it is the first S tier that we will talk about.
Yeah, it is
this time.
I would even give it a double S tier if I could.
S plus.
S triple tier. It is. I mean, it's in my top 10. Yeah. I've talked about this.
Go watch that podcast.
Please go watch that podcast. I hope and pray that one day we will get a 30 or IMAX re-release. I'm sure we have. I'm just not paying attention. But hey, I can't wait till next year. When next year, 10 years old, and we can talk about it.
Yeah. Maybe they'll get its re-release then.
Yeah, maybe. But all
right, let's.
Yeah, I love it. Let's move on.
Let's go back to 2005.
This is it. This is the beginning right here. Batman Begins. This is when he starts to become the household name for just people who watch movies. He reinvents the genre when the genre was dying, or not even dying. It was dead.
Yeah.
I think the last mainstream comic book movie was the George Clooney Batman. Was that Batman and Robin or Batman Forever?
So that will be Batman and Robin.
Okay, yeah. I think it's the last. I mean, there's the Hulk, which is weird.
There's the Hulk. There's all the X-Men movies.
Weird one. The first two X-Men movies, I think, which are also very weird.
Oh, hold on.
There's Spider-Man, the Raimi trilogy, which you have feelings on that I don't agree with, but regardless, they're there, and I. But other than that, there's not.
Let's see here.
Anything to the degree.
So there was Ben Affleck's Daredevil. That came out in 2003.
Right. That's a dud.
That was a dud. And then there's
the Elektra, which is Jennifer Gardner.
And then there was the 2004 classic
Halle Berry
Catwoman.
Yeah, so those two movies basically killed superhero movies.
Yeah, so superhero movies were open and shut case at this point.
That was we just put the last patch of dirt on the coffin for superhero movies. But then this guy comes, this young British man.
You act like he single-handedly was like, no, I want to save Batman.
Which is funny because I think he actually didn't want to do Batman.
Yeah.
He was very... I think he didn't want... I think I've seen an interview, where he was very hesitant. And the only reason he did it because basically Warner was like, yo, we'll do whatever you want after.
Yeah.
Just we want you to do. I mean, Inception was the big white whale, so to speak. But I think this movie is a wonderful reinvention of the genre.
Mm-hmm.
It changes. I mean, you go and listen to any interviewer about, or an interview with any director of any superhero movie post this movie, and they all influence either this movie or the trilogy as a whole, of just what they were able to do to make it not only dark and gritty, but just to make it more authentic. It feels feel the pain that Batman is going through. It's not just fun and like Adam West
funny.
Style.
It is a funny
it is
film,
a very
though.
funny movie, which I think when we first talked about it, we were surprised at how funny it is. It has that whimsical nature that a comic book movie would have, but it also has the like serious tone of a crime drama that is there in Genesis, but it becomes full-fledged in the next installment, which I'm excited to get to. But this is a fun one, and this is all of his regulars. This is when he starts to meet with Michael Caine and Wally Fisher, Lee Smith, Zimmer. This is when it all starts to come together for him, and he starts assembling his squad, so to speak.
So Wally Fisher had worked on Memento and Insomnia before this as well, but I think the style of cinematography that he became most associated with really starts with the Dark Knight trilogy, with Batman Begins 2. I think that Nolan's him and this film was also written by David S. Goyer, who will write the other Dark Knight movies as well. And he's the guy who understands comic books as well, so they're not just making this whole cloth. They have information that they're working from, and they're pulling from the Batman mythos. But comic books and superheroes at this time were kind of in this like angsty teenage years of trying to be as dark and edgy as possible. And I think that this movie managed to capture that energy and attitude in a way that didn't feel like it's maximum, like possible, like this is the end point of it. Still left a lot of room for improvement and possibility, which would of course allow for the two other films in the series, but managed to hit it just on the head of the nail well enough that it created basically the modern paradigm of superhero films that we are in. And I think that the success that Warner Brothers and by extension DC Comics had with this Batman trilogy allowed Marvel to say, we want in on the action too. Fox also tried to with the X-Men films, but that didn't really go as planned for them.
For better or worse.
For better or for worse. But overall, how would you rank this one?
This is an A.
An A? Yeah. I feel like this cast of characters, let's see here.
This is also when Nolan, he starts to realize that action can also create, action is the juice, that action can also create these emotional beats.
Yeah,
right?
I think so too.
Because this is when, I mean, there's numerous scenes where you're like, he's fighting dudes off or something like that, or and you're like, whoa, and he hits it with that triumphant, that comes in. I just butchered that Hans Zimmer score. I apologize, Hans, if you're watching this, but he hits it with the Hans Zimmer score. The action's going, there's like 50 million people around Batman, and then it's just like, whoa, he did that. And it just kind of creates this fun viewing experience that I think it's one of the trademarks of his career. Yeah.
I feel like this film, too, does a good job of being a comic book film. Because I feel like the compliment Nolan gets with the Dark Knight trilogy is that they don't feel like comic book movies. But this one still has, it has just enough of Nolan and just enough of what it should be, which is a Batman film, that it feels pretty even keel. of course, moving into the future, that will dissipate a little bit.
Yeah. Because Gotham is still Gotham. Right?
Gotham
it's
is
not,
Gotham. Yeah.
I mean, they shoot in real U.S. cities, but it's not. Oh, here's the most iconic bridge in all of Pittsburgh, like the three Pittsburgh bridges, or like a important street in Chicago.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for all Chicago and Pittsburgh natives, but I don't know the names.
But it's also like there is an attempt to make it Gotham City. There is Arkham Asylum.
Yeah.
Features, or it's not Arkham, but it's like a area.
It's like the slums of Gotham. Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So there is definitely like an attempt at making this. Like,
whereas when we get to Dark Knight Rises, it's literally like
here's
Carnegie Mellon. Shoot on the steps of Carnegie Mellon.
They just do away with all the references to.
You're like, wait a minute, I've been there before.
Nevertheless, definitely a good Batman movie. In my opinion, I think The Batman does a better origin story for early Batman, in my opinion.
Sure.
This is an origin story. I prefer that one a little bit more.
What did you think of the non-linear intro?
That's right.
A lot of flashbacks.
Yeah.
In the beginning.
I remember liking that a lot. The whole like
it's a good way to introduce a character.
And his like relationship with Liam Neeson as the villain. I think
I remember being confused because I was like, Batman is supposed to be rich. Why is he robbing,
why is he hitchhiking around?
Yeah, why is he in like Nepal or something? I don't know where they're supposed to be, but why is he doing that? And this is also, I think this is when he starts to use the trademark sweeping landscape shot that just is like, hey, I have an IMAX camera. Let me use it. I'm going to do whatever I want with it.
Understandable.
Which I don't think this one was filmed on IMAX, but it definitely makes it look cooler when he actually does transition to IMAX and he's like, hey, here's, a cool city. I don't know.
All right. Well, now we get to do the most Nolan thing possible, because the next film is the last movie in the trilogy. We get to talk about The Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah.
This was the conclusion to the Dark Knight trilogy.
Correct.
It came out in 2012. Same Christian Bale, Michael Caine, Gary Oldman, Tom Hardy as well, who will become a staple.
This elevates him to a blockbuster.
I feel like Inception probably did that. He was in Inception.
Kind of, but Inception, he was more of a side character. That's true. This is him.
Yeah, this is
an
Bane.
Actual, like, adversary to our protagonist.
Yeah, man. If you didn't do,
he's very good in
voice,
Inception. I'll tell you that though. He's very good in Inception, which we'll get to. But
definitely the Bane performance from Tom Hardy. This is definitely the beginning of the Tom Hardy renaissance as well.
Yeah, for sure.
That we got. So when this film came out, it had a very controversial and divisive reaction.
The ending.
So it was divisive. So first off, it was controversial. Might not be the best way to phrase that.
It was talked about a lot.
Because of the Aurora shooting that was perpetrated during this film. Brought a lot of press to the movie that, while it was not the film's fault, I think dampened a lot of the excitement for this film that people might have had for it to somewhat be associated.
I don't know. It was still a packed theater when I went.
It was still a packed theater, I think, but there was a bit more of a, like, I don't know. From my perspective, it felt that way. From my perspective, and I remember seeing this film for the first time. Still made $1 billion, but that's also including worldwide as well. This film was definitely very divisive as the conclusion to the trilogy, because it goes places towards the end, and
in the end, you could say in the beginning.
In the beginning, I mean. Yeah, this feels like there was a better plan in place that he just wasn't allowed to do. And so he just had to go with maybe the next best idea in line, which was this Bane story. And it feels like I would almost say that this is another Nolan completionist film. I think for some people, I think so. I think so.
No way. Are you kidding me?
No.
This is the most definitive action trilogy of the last 20 years. There's no way you're going to say it's a Nolan completionist movie.
It is a definitive trilogy. And
if you like Batman, you're watching this movie.
That's fair to say.
If you like action movies, you're watching this movie.
Like Batman. I don't know. For me, this film just...
If you like comic books, you're watching this movie.
It
made $1 billion at the franchise. It made $1 billion, and you're going to say it's a completionist movie? No way. No way. I can agree with you that it's a step down, and it's not the same level as every other work. But to say it's a completionist movie...
I guess it's just how I feel after all this time that's passed, where it feels like, there are individual moments in this film that really stand out, in my opinion, for good and for bad. Mm-hmm. But
yeah, for sure.
There's just too many balls in the air for him to juggle in this film, in my opinion. And it's a step down. But I'm not gonna lie, I think a lot of that $1 billion came from riding off the high of The Dark Knight.
Oh yeah, it's Batman.
Yeah, so that's just where I'm kind of coming from. Where I just feel like looking back on it, I would only recommend this film to people who have seen the first two, or either just want to watch every other.
Well, yeah, you have to watch the first two to watch this one.
Hence why we call it a completionist movie.
Yeah, but to say it's like a Nolan completionist movie is... That's just insulting. That's just... You're putting it on the same level as Following. That's not even... Or Insomnia. That's not even...
I just don't rate this movie that well. Look, just personally,
That's
this
fair.
just didn't do it to me.
It's still Batman. It's still an action movie. And it still made $1 billion at the box. This is one of the most highest selling trilogy sets of all time. They come out with a special edition like every 6 months.
Yeah, seriously.
Oh man, that's funny.
So
I don't know, because the highs are really high here. Mm-hmm. When he gets out of the pit, really
pit.
Fun. When he gets his ass kicked at Bane, I remember watching that in theaters and being like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, yeah. Even just like any Bane scene too is just like a
very jaw dropping. Mm-hmm. Like, I can't believe they actually just killed the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah. Whatever high school football team is.
Yeah. I can't believe they did that. Like, scenes like that are really cool. Or like Bane's speech when he's breaking the jail. Mm-hmm. Really fun. The problem is this is bogged down by the stupid Talia. What's her name? Marion Cotillard character, Talia, whatever her last name is. Can't stand her. Jim Gordon's basically irrelevant for an hour and a half of this movie.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, okay, cool. Can we get to the cool stuff again?
Yeah.
We're explaining this nuclear bomb that, which I guess you need to do it, but it's like, do we need to spend 30 minutes talking about this stupid bomb?
Yeah.
Like, can we just make it a bomb?
Sometimes when you watch a movie for the first time, you don't know what is going to happen. They could pull any twist out of their ass throughout the course of a film. But when you're looking back on something, you might see the ending and think, all right, what did I have to go through to get to that ending? And there's a certain point where you just think, well, then none of that was worth it. We didn't have to have an explanation of all this nuclear weapon stuff if by the ending it doesn't do anything.
But that's the point. That's why that's why he has to stop it.
That's why. Yeah, I don't know. This movie just doesn't hit for me, man. This film was just really. I think I was far more disappointed. Possibly, I think this movie might be, until he came out with Interstellar. This was probably the reason why I didn't really rate Christopher Nolan that well, because I was like, "You're gonna give us this." This was like the Tenet of its day.
You're gonna give us this, only like one of the greatest action movies of all time. How dare you?
I'm a contrarian by nature. I'm sorry. Movie makes $1 billion, and I go, nah, 1 billion people can't be right about something.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny.
I think I would. That being said, I would probably rate this film a B.
You did all that. You rated it a B
because it's not.
Oh my god!
It's not insulting.
Oh, that's funny.
It's
that's
just
so funny.
Not good in my opinion.
Oh man, but B is good. B is above passing. B is above average.
Yeah, I think it's just that. It's just in the context of every other thing that he's done, just falls a little bit for me.
Okay,
not stand out.
Fair enough. I'd also give it a B.
Mm-hmm.
But it is. I don't know. That ending hits every time. Every time I watch it, that ending hits. I love that ending. You don't even like the ending?
No.
Oh my lord.
No.
Okay.
This is like I said. I'm not as big of a Nolan fanboy as you are. I mean, fanboys makes it sound like you would just eat up anything that he gives.
No, it definitely has problems.
Yeah,
and I'm not disagreeing with you.
This is the one where I think the problems outweigh the positives for me, way more than they do in, say, Tenet, for example, or Dunkirk. Or I'm just like, maybe because I love comics, maybe because I think Batman Begins and Dark Knight are fantastic. This just almost very little about this film really connected with me when
when was the last time you watched this?
Last time I saw it, I rewatched it when we did our first podcast.
Oh, okay.
So that was the last time I saw it. And that's just my opinion, man.
I think that's the last time I rewatched this, too.
Maybe calling it a completionist film is egregious. But nevertheless.
This is on the same basis, you know. I don't know. I was thinking of something.
I mean, hey, next film we got to talk about is The Prestige, which, if there is, in my opinion, another good first Nolan film you can show the people, I think
this is it. Yeah, this is the one that is his most. The highs are really high and the lows aren't that low.
Yeah.
If we said that the opposite for Tenet. But it's a very straightforward movie. It's well, let me get there.
Yeah.
Let me get there. It is a dueling narrative, just basic two adversaries going at one another, each other, and the stakes escalate throughout the entire movie. But what does this movie does so well is it's a framing narrative, but the framing narrative is non-linear.
Yeah.
So not only are we reading, I think we're reading a journal entry or something, right? Or a note. He leaves him a note at the end.
He's tracking him down.
Yeah, he leaves him a note because he's in jail. One of the characters is in jail. So he leaves him a note detailing everything. But that flashback is also non-linear to show like different moments, and you're like, how do you have? I want to see that man's whiteboard when he's coming up with a movie. Because the ability to do something like that is, and to make it, I don't want to say not confusing, but legible at the very least.
Yeah.
It reads. You might have to watch it more than once. But it's really an interesting take. And it highlights his this is a straightforward movie. I'm just going to make it very, very confusing for just fun. Yeah. And there's obviously structural reasons for that and plot and narrative reasons for that. But that's one of the reasons why I just look at Insomnia and I'm like, this could have been so much better.
Yeah.
Because you could have done some more Nolan pizzazz with it and you just didn't want to. Couldn't, I guess I should say. But this is when Christian Bale starts to come out. Because he's now in Batman Begins and in this movie, even though this movie was a little less zeitgeisty. It's not as popular, I would say.
Well, I think the thing too is that, and this was back in the 2000s, where superhero films weren't really a good bet, even if they were successful to a certain extent. And so the idea that you would make a superhero film and you would now be a superhero director, as opposed to now, I think directors sign on to do superhero films. They're signing on to do superhero films, and there's not an expectation that you'll, go quickly do another thing real fast and then be right back. And so I think that there's this element of like the beginning of like directors being able to control the franchise. I think we haven't really stepped into that point just yet because we're still getting detours in, where a director might be going with, there's not the straight commitment of like, what I'm trying to say is I feel like we might be used to the idea of you do Batman Begins, Dark Knight, and Dark Knight Rises, but that's like 3 years in a row. They come out back to back to back.
Yeah.
Whereas the idea of taking detours or making films in between the films kind of feels like it's almost like
you don't see it very often.
No.
Right? Because that's like the Russo brothers being like, all right, we just killed everybody at the end of Infinity War.
Yeah. Check out the next film, The Gray Man.
Black Widow.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, wait a minute. And it's an interesting decision, but it's one that was kind of made for him because he wanted to do this one before Batman, but then he made Batman, and then he obviously had all the success and yada, 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 and he was like, all right, cool, now I got my funding to make this movie. Let's just make this one now.
He'll do it again.
And he does it once more. So it's an interesting movie. It's very cool. I'll say that, if nothing more, it has the idea that magicians are willing to kill each other.
Yeah, this is...
I remember reading it, when I heard about it, I was like, this sounds stupid. And then I watched it and I was like, this is pretty good. It's not bad. It's not bad.
I feel like this is the most Nolan film of all of his small budget films, even more so than Memento, because even though Memento has this nonlinear story structure, I feel like in terms of, this feels like the most personal in terms of the themes in this, the obsession that these characters have, and also the search for a larger spectacle that they go to, which is also something that Nolan has succumbed to in a lot of his films. This feels like almost like a personal film for him, maybe. That being said, though, I think that this is a good first Nolan film because it's a good first watch, a lot like Interstellar.
Yeah.
In my opinion, this doesn't really hold up to rewatching that much once you kind of know the ending. That's just my opinion, though. But I definitely think that of the smaller budget, less than $100 million budget.
It's weird talking about them because you have to kind of it's like, all right, The Dark Knight is its own thing.
Yeah.
And then everything post Interstellar is its own thing.
Yeah, pretty much. So I feel like of those pre-Dark Knight Nolan films, I feel like this is probably the best in terms of just encapsulating his like style and what he is going for. Early Nolan, in my opinion. Even more so maybe than Batman Begins, in my opinion, just because, like I said, it's like half Nolan, half Batman film. This one is just pure Nolan all the way through. You know what you're going to get. And so, yeah, I think this was a solid A+ in my opinion.
The best
right stamp.
Christian Bale performance?
With Nolan or just in general?
Yeah, with Nolan. There's only 4 to choose from, and 3 of them he's playing the
He's playing the exact same character. Yeah, that's fair. I think with Nolan, no, I still don't think this is Christian Bale's best, in my opinion. And in terms of his career overall, I also don't think this is Christian Bale's best.
Definitely not his career overall.
It goes to American Psycho. But
I was going to say Ford versus Ferrari.
That's understandable too. Nevertheless, all right, should we move ahead? Should we go back to the future? Or you got... Let's see here. Is this also, I believe, his first collaboration with his brother as well? Since
they worked on Memento together.
They worked on Memento together.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. Because the short story was... it was based off a short story that was written by Jonathan.
That's right. Nolan gets sole screenwriting credit for Memento, but he shares screenwriting credit with his brother on The Prestige. Yeah. So he's definitely brought his brother into the fold.
Weird David Bowie.
Yeah,
Appearance.
I remember thinking back.
Did not know that was David Bowie until like maybe 2 hours ago.
Really? Yeah. You know, it's funny. I think I knew it was David Bowie. Forgot it was David Bowie. Thought it was Kenneth Braun. For some reason. It's such a, like, he's not a musician who you really think of as an actor too well, unless you're a big David Bowie fan.
Yeah.
And it's not a role that you would.
Yeah, because he's like the opposite of what he would usually be, right?
For Nikola Tesla.
David Bowie was so. Was it David Bowie? I don't want to miss. He was like so not just like looking like Tesla.
Yeah. He definitely channels Kenneth Braun, I think, for his Tesla performance, in my opinion. Also, a really good Andy Serkis outside of motion capture performance as well. Always glad to see that.
This is when he starts to realize the emotional impact of his endings.
That's true too.
Which I think is Batman Begins has it, but it's just a typical comic book ending where it's like we're alluding to the next one.
Yeah.
This one, it's like, what just happened?
Yeah, this is definitely a good example of some might knowing some reception for better or for worse, but a good just like how to take people's expectation and rather than doing a twist, subverting the expectations where it feels like you both
impactful.
Yeah, it's. I guess it's a twist, you might say, but I don't think it's actually a twist, in my opinion. Nevertheless.
Because the breadcrumbs are there the whole way.
Yeah. If you're looking.
One of those things where it's like you rewatch it just to pick up on all those.
Yeah, that's the thing, though. I feel like this movie is really good rewatching. If you want to just catch those little moments, I definitely think knowing the ending, it's just really good for that, in my opinion. But nevertheless, still a good film.
It's like watching the ending of a Telltale game or something. Yeah. Like watching all 4 of the different endings.
That's funny. Yeah,
that's what it's like. It's like you know how you got there, but you want to see how else everything you could get there. Yeah. Like the different things you could do to get to. Yeah, I don't know. Funny. It's just that's how I think of it.
All right, let's move ahead. Let's get back to the future. 2010. Nolan releases Inception, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Ken Watanabe, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Marion Cotillard, and Elliot Page.
The artist formerly known as Ellen Page.
And Tom Hardy as well, and Cillian Murphy, and Michael Caine.
And Tom Berenger.
Yeah. Elliot Page.
I'll start here, or I'll ask you this before you go.
Yeah.
Greatest cast ever assembled of all time?
Probably not, no.
Who's better?
That's a good question. You know, it's one of those things where I say it's probably not because I feel like if I really searched, I would find something better. But I think for this film, this is definitely on the money. Every single role in performance.
Especially like the smaller roles.
Oh, yeah.
Like the nothing. Like the Tom Berenger role. Yeah. Or the Tom Hardy role where it's literally just like you have 5 scenes you're important in. Mm-hmm. You have 20 lines of dialogue.
Yeah.
You know, I'm giving this to you, but, you know. Mm-hmm. Do with that what you will.
Yeah. So I feel like, too, it's also one of those films where I feel like it does an ensemble cast really well because no one, with the exception of Leonardo DiCaprio, who is the main character, the rest of the cast, they're not cameos. They're just there in the background with their scenes and their individual contributions. Joseph Gordon-Levitt has his moment. Elliot Page has his moments. Tom Hardy has his moments. Michael Caine, he's just Michael Caine, honestly. He's just getting his freebie check from Nolan.
Scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, though, how would you describe how you felt watching this film for the first time?
This is the movie, and I think we've talked about this, that I have the most, I get the most whiplash from watching, just in terms of emotion. Because on one hand, I'm like, and a lot of it, I'll say right now, is based off of others' reactions, where they're like, oh, this is the greatest thing of all time.
Yeah.
Like, it's not really. It's just, you know, a really fun heist movie that has a cool twist that people don't understand, but if you watch it, you understand the ending.
Yeah,
you know the ending. You know the ending. But it's just people just don't want to pay attention, or just don't pay attention, or whatever have you.
I have something to say about that.
So for me, this is always the one that I just kind of am like, it is what it is. Obviously, it's a really good movie. But to say, like, if I were to, like, I'm not going to put it in the S tier, and I debate putting it in the A tier from time to time.
That's
But
understandable.
the thing is, the action sequences are really, really good.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful score, probably Hans Zimmer's second most iconic score. And it's really good performances from everybody, including, like, I mean, Tom Hardy. This is might be my favorite Tom Hardy role that he's ever done.
That's funny.
And it's a really good, interesting themes to it, right? Themes of obsession and reality and dreams.
And those are a part of the story. They're not separate from them. And that's why the ending is so obvious when you just look at the themes of the story. I don't know why anybody was ever confused about the ending. That's the whole point of the film. Anyway.
Okay, keep going.
So I think, in my opinion, I would put this in S tier, up there with Interstellar, in my opinion. Just because this film, again, it does a great job of blending, the theme with the story to the point where they are just one and the same, where a piece of action happens, but it's so related to what the character is going through that you can't possibly not see it as character development in a way. And the action is so original at a time. This is 2010. This is post Dark Knight, but this is also, I think, where blockbusters might have been getting a bit of a bad rep at this point. I think it was really easy to just shit on, like, the Transformer films, or like anything Michael Bay was doing, at least, or what have you, all the like Roland Emmerich films. And so just to have like a concept that was in action that was so embedded in its concept that you could do cool things, like have a hotel hallway rotate, or you could have these like slow-mo action fight scenes where people are like turning upside down and doing stuff like that. It was just so original that it really for me back then hit the mark. I think that's really what I like most about this film, is the action. More so than the story, the characters. I think I just keep returning to those amazing action scenes. I feel like this is really where he... I think I agree that there might be an emphasis put on this being seen as like a character-driven story, which is totally understandable. But in my opinion, I just think that this is where Christopher Nolan does a better job as an action director. In my opinion, even though it is a more character-focused film with Leonardo DiCaprio, who, by the way, I think actually does a good job. I feel like this is also some of the least stilted acting that you will get out of Nolan this side of Insomnia.
That's what happens when you have one of the, the definitive actor of
a generation,
this generation working for you. But yeah, I feel like this is the blending of art house filmmaking
and blockbuster.
With blockbuster, and he does it in this movie probably to the best. Because like The Prestige, Interstellar, The Prestige is not showy enough or not flashy enough.
It's more
to
art
get
house.
to get the audiences. And Interstellar is in space, so obviously people are gonna be like
more blockbuster.
Automatically just I want to watch this movie. This movie, it's an original idea. It's a very basic narrative, but the narrative is not there to do anything special. It's purely there so that way we can do the cool action sequences based off of what is happening to these characters. And it's because like if you're, you can make movies, and there have been movies about memories and dreams and reality and what does it all mean, and does any of this matter, stuff like that. That's been done many, many times before. But to do it in a setting, in an arena that just excites audience members and makes them be like, yeah, I will go watch that in theaters. Yeah, I've seen that movie 10 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really fun. And obviously it helps when you have, the editor, the cinematographer, the composer that you've been working with to keep working with, just so everybody kind of rises up together.
Yeah.
It's a really fun movie.
Absolutely.
Really fun.
Absolutely.
This is like Nolan hitting the crest, and then he's coming down just a little bit, not a lot, but he's coming. He's gonna hit that crest again
I
eventually.
think a lot of people would also disagree with you on that too, but hey, that's your opinion. No, I think in my opinion, Inception I would put in S tier for me. Just personally, the when I first saw this film, the impact it had on me, I loved it since day one. So I think this is up there with Interstellar. But I have also heard a lot of dissenting opinions, and so I've heard enough criticism and seen them that I understand why some people put this in an A or a B.
Yeah. All right. Spoiler.
All right.
Real quick. Is it a dream?
That's the thing, though. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, but is it a dream? You can say that as the filmmaker. You can tell that to an audience member. But as a director, you have to know that answer.
I think the answer was that it doesn't matter. He gets to see his kids. He doesn't care.
He's not dreaming.
He's
not wearing the ring.
Nolan,
he's not dreaming.
But Leonardo DiCaprio's character. I'm saying purely thematically in the context of the story.
Sure.
To Leonardo DiCaprio, his character, it doesn't matter if it's a dream, doesn't matter if it's real life. He gets to see his kids, and that's all that matters. I feel like he just did the top spinning thing just to mess with people.
Oh, definitely, 100%.
Yeah,
100%.
So I don't, and so to me, whether it's a dream or not, it's understandable people would ask that. I feel like it's the wrong question. I feel like it's whether it's the good ending or not.
Yeah.
It's like, it's the good ending.
Yeah.
He sees his kids.
Yeah. I don't know how else you would end that movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
That top spinning, though, man, too many people.
Oh, it's really good. It's a really good ending.
It is.
Really good ending.
All right.
Here we go.
Funnily enough, I don't think we planned this, but we meet in the middle.
I actually was in the middle when we decided to do it. I was like, oh, nice. It worked out pretty well.
Nice.
All right. We're going on to the birthday boy.
Yeah.
The big one.
15. 2008.
The, I'll just say it right now. Of the 2000s. Probably top. It's on a short list of the movies that matter the most. Not only does it, it's a really good at crime. Let me get my thoughts together. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. So
it is a definitive comic movie. Sorry, it's a definitive crime drama, definitive action movie, all into one. It encapsulates or incorporates, for a better word, the best elements of all three. Nolan throws away the comic bookness of these movies, the silly whimsicalness. Just says, this is pure drama. I am making a movie for the big screen. This is me. I think this is the first time he uses... Yeah, this is the first time that it's ever... a IMAX camera is ever used for a movie. He just pulls out all the stops and says, this is going to be my magnum opus. And it is. It is my favorite movie. Tied with The Two Godfathers for number one. I can't get enough of this movie. There is I think I told you this, where there's a 45-minute segment.
Oh, yeah.
From when he gets, I don't think it's 45 minutes, but it's from when Dent gets arrested until, spoiler, Rachel dies.
Yeah.
That is just one of the greatest 30-odd minute I've ever seen in a TV. I've loved it ever since I was 10 or 11 when I watched this movie for the first time.
Yeah.
I've watched it at least once a year, every year since. It's my movie.
And do you feel like at the time where you watched it, though, was there like a sense that it was competing with other superhero films? Because as far as I remember back then, this was like its own thing from the beginning. It wasn't even marketed as like... And truth be told, when I was a kid, I never even saw Batman Begins. I didn't see it until I was way, way, way older.
Yeah.
And so when this film came out, I just remember almost seeming like a completely standalone thing. I don't know if you felt that way when you.
No, yeah, it. And the thing that was interesting to me the most, because I had seen all the crappy superhero movies up to that point,
all the X-Men, all the Wolverines.
all the X-Men. I referenced Hulk. I saw the Eric Bana Hulk. It is a funny movie, but it is a
product of its time.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. But this movie, I remember back then remembering just like my uncle was talking about this movie. My dad wants to talk about this.
Yeah.
Like, my parents took me to go see this movie. Like, it was one of those things where it's like real life adults are watching this. This is a really good movie. And all of them were like, this is a really, really good movie. And I think it's the first time that I remember, at least with comic book movies, that being a thing where it was, this is the movie of the year. This is like, not only is it for the comic book nerds, but it's just for if you like movies.
I feel like sometimes there's a certain type of film that people who they like films, just general audience members might kind of have like a this is too much reaction in a positive way. To say like, there is something else about this film that is just operating on a level higher than what I am used to seeing or really get right now. I think it's important to see films like that because it can raise your awareness of
you find
the
stuff
art of
you find
filmmaking.
stuff you would not normally think you would like. Yeah,
but I feel like this was, because it was a Batman film, because it was a blockbuster, nobody really expected to see that out of it. And so when they go into the theaters and they just are strapped in for this, firing on all cylinders, gas,
from
pedal to the metal from the jump.
Yep.
It's like that's people probably didn't really know what they were getting into. I think that really attributes to the,
and it still stands the test. I mean, I showed this. I think I told this to you, but I showed it to somebody that we knew back when we were in college, and I showed it to her for the first time ever. That's the first time she had ever seen it, and we got done watching it, and she looks, and I'm like, "You all right?" She's like, "I couldn't breathe." I was like, "Whoa!" Like, it's crazy that a movie could still make people feel like that for the first time.
Yeah,
obviously that was like 12. At that time, it was like 11, 12 years. But now, 15 years later, I mean, you watched it a couple months ago, and you had that same reaction. Yeah, you had that same, because that was the first time you watched it in how long?
Oh, because I didn't even rewatch it for our original podcast. So I think I had first seen it probably, I mean, I didn't see it when they came out. I probably saw it in like 2010, 2009 or something like that. 2009, 2010, maybe around then. Because I definitely saw it like renting it from Blockbusters or something like that.
Yeah,
when I watched it. So yeah, definitely. So I guess to break it down a little bit further, let's get into the nitty gritty for it. So the elements out of this film that, in my opinion, the reason why this film is Nolan's magnum opus, more so than Interstellar or Inception. The reason why I think this film really encapsulates Nolan's as a director comes down to, I think, two things. The first would be the synergy between editing and soundtrack. I think. Yeah. Even though you might think, oh, that's an editor thing, that's a composer thing, the director's ability to bring those together, along with what his vision was while he was filming, is just done masterfully here. I mean, the fact that the way that the score will bleed over scenes, not just end at when a scene ends, but will bleed over into the beginning of the next scene, adds so much to that building tension that is just constant throughout this film, like a pebble in your shoe, that you're just like an anxiety that just is running through the course of this film.
The way that I describe this soundtrack, it feels like a knife scraping against like a violin. Or something. It's
just like, it's not eerie.
But it's unsettling.
Just unsettling. And then he is consistently cross-cutting throughout the course of this entire film. There is almost no individual scene that really gets to breathe on its own until about the midway point where he kind of literally lets you breathe.
Yeah.
By the end of that sequence that you were talking about, where it feels like you really get the first breath in the course of this film. Camera died.
Wow, camera died. First time ever.
And the second thing that I think that this film really is representative of Nolan is its focus on being a complete film rather than being in just having those individual, like, perfect moments throughout. Because oftentimes you might take a shot, right, and you want to get it perfect. You want it to just have that, like, Wes Anderson kind of symmetry, or all the colors are, whatever. I feel like Nolan's approach to this film really just felt kind of like blasé in a way, where there are so many individual shots and cuts that just felt like you almost want to ask, like, couldn't you get another take of this, my guy? Like, this is the shot that you use. Even the ending of the film is like feels not like thrown away, but just so like, yep, that's the ending. That's where we're putting it. And I so totally respect that, because there's a subversion of your expectation, especially when you love films, when you're like a cinephile. You're like, I'm going to watch this film because every frame is going to be a painting.
Yeah.
And then you have a director who's kind of like, yeah, well, we got this shot, we threw it in there. And to do that is so, like, ballsy in a way. It's the same reason why I talk about Gladiator and Ridley Scott's direction in Gladiator, where it's like how you would film some of those shots, you could give to any other director and they wouldn't do that. But for some reason, Christopher Nolan was like, yeah, this is how I'm going to do this in this film. And just, it feels almost patchwork in a way. The way that some of those shots are constructed and put together feels kind of like patchwork. Personally, I love that. I don't really get that with a lot of other films, except for maybe Gladiator. Not to say that Gladiator is at the same level as The Dark Knight, but just to say that there's a feeling there, an approach to Nolan's actual directing in scenes, and the individual shot choice. It's like, it's fast paced and it's thrown together, but it's so cohesive that it almost feels intentional, which you hope it was. Those are, for me, the two elements of Nolan's directing, not just as a storyteller, any of the themes or anything like that, just as a director on the day. What is he doing in the camera? I feel like the combination of those two things make The Dark Knight, in my opinion, Nolan's best film.
The character is almost like a character.
Mm-hmm.
What did I say? Oh, no, the camera. Did I say a character? I meant to say, I don't know what I said.
Camera is like
the camera
a
is almost like a character, which is why it probably attributes to a lot of the shoddy, for lack of a better word, shot sequence. Because you're like, you have one of the greatest working cinematographers. Why can't everything be so polished? But it's like, that's not what we're supposed to do. We're just going to watch this crime drama unfolds, and the camera's going to be right here just because it's kind of...
It just happened to be there.
It just is. You're here, you're watching. It is a roller coaster that has no ups, only downs. If you put a roller coaster on Mount Everest and rotated it around the mountain and just went all the way down, that is what this movie is. That's how I describe this movie.
That's funny.
It it was a genre-defining movie. I think every superhero movie past this has
comics
attributed it to this. There was a renaissance in comics, I guess, of just... We just finally realized, and I say we like I'm a part of any kind of group, but I think storytellers just realized, why don't we take these really, really cool characters that everybody likes and actually have depth to them? Because
who would have thought?
This is when I think This is probably the lowest we've ever seen Batman.
Yeah.
At least
until
spiritually and emotionally until The Dark Knight Rises.
Until Dark Knight Rises, where he literally goes underground.
Yeah. But yeah, it's the ability to do that, the wherewithal, I guess, to make this a movie and to construct it in a way where it's its own thing, right? I think we've talked about how our favorite sequels are just movies that stand out well on their own. The thing about them is that they just amplify the original.
Yeah.
Right. And that's numerous sequels do that. And I think that's one of the most impressive things about this one is Nolan's like, I'm not making this 3-act structure about, Frodo and the elves or the hobbits trying to take the ring back.
Yeah.
I am making just Batman movies that at this point, he's like, I just want to make a good, compelling crime drama.
Yeah.
And this is a really good, compelling crime drama. It just so happens that Batman is the protagonist.
Yeah.
And Joker is the antagonist, which we have to discuss the Heath Ledger piece because it is...
it's so interesting reading about the history of this film. Before it came out, people questioned Heath Ledger as the Joker, which in retrospect, I wasn't following the marketing for this film when it came out. Like I said, I totally missed it.
We were young at that age.
But looking back on it, it's like you just never know with decisions like that. People said the same thing about Jared Leto as the Joker, and they were absolutely right. And so it's like...
Or people said the same thing about Robert Pattinson as Batman. People were like, oh, he's too skinny, he looks too small, and this and that. And it's like, he might be the best Batman that we've had.
Yeah, better than... probably better.
There's an argument to be made for sure. I think so, but...
Absolutely. So that's one of those things where you're just like... the even without having seen this film, the impact, the way that it captured the public consciousness at the time, Heath Ledger's performance as the Joker, specifically, I should say, just feels like somebody opened a black hole and dropped something to us and said, oh, there you go, have fun with it. And it's like, we had no idea that we wanted to see anything like this or that we were going to, but it's like it totally, predicted what we would end up getting, or predicted is the wrong word, I guess. There's a better word that starts with a P that would explain how this, like the way people would act around Bane in the next one, or Thanos when we would get Infinity War, the way that these kind of villain characters would just capture people's attention and almost become more than the film itself, but almost representative of the way that people were just feeling at the time. It feels like, I don't know, it almost feels more than the movie because of that. Not to say that this is the greatest film of all time, but it feels larger than the movie itself, is what I guess I should say. There is definitely a... This film, I think, was a product of its time in a way that a lot of people felt more than they were able to articulate. The way that it captured people's attention. There was just, whether people wanted a distraction in 2008.
This was a pop culture hit. This is like Beyonce announcing she's having twins.
This was
level of craziness.
When it made $1 billion, people were like, that was as big as like the first YouTube channel that hit 1 million subscribers.
Yeah. This was a thing. I remember being a thing.
Absolutely.
And I think to kind of go off your Heath Ledger thing about villains, I think this movie and No Country for Old Men really showed that we can do more for villains. This movie, I think, is... I mean, I can sit here all day, but it is, in more ways than one, so influential to the industry post, 15 years on, just beyond comic book and the genre of comic books. I think it just showed that the importance of storytelling in these types of movies is important, and also, like all elements of filmmaking are very important, which I think at some point, at least in the early 2000s, we kind of just lost sight of. To a degree. But
all right,
it is triple S tier.
I'll just give it normal S tier along with the other ones, in my opinion.
It is one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, when you went to rewatch it, was there anything that you were, because I think you gave it an S tier the first time around.
Yeah.
And that was obviously off your first viewing. So when you went to go rewatch it a couple months ago, was there anything that impressed you for the better? Like, was there something where you were like, oh, that's not very cool, or something like that, and then you watched it again and you were like, oh, that's actually really interesting?
I definitely think the being able to better articulate the things that I did like about the film, because you might go on YouTube and watch certain like scenes and moments and be like, there's something about this beyond what's actually happening on screen. There's an approach to his directing and style that I like, and I can't really think about what it is. Rewatching it, I think, like I said earlier, the editing and music and his actual approach to shot choice were really the things that I like honed in on far more. That being said, though, I was also better able to articulate the negatives that I felt towards this film as well, particularly the mass invasion of privacy that gets justified by the end of this film. I was a little bit like,
it's a real trendsetter, that Nolan guy.
Whether he intended to or not.
Yeah. He had a 411 on the NSA at the time.
Yeah, a bit of a Cassandra in that regard.
It is funny because I remember watching it at first and being like, when I was 11 years old, whatever, and just thinking like, oh, that's kind of neat. We should employ that more. and then we did employ that more. And I was kind of like, wait a minute, that's not very cool.
Yeah.
It's not very Cash Money at you.
Yeah. There's also another moment too, I think, where I think Dent is in an ambulance being transported to the hospital, and Bruce wants to stop it. So he takes his Lamborghini and he rams into it. And I'm like, bro, just because you're a millionaire doesn't mean you can just cause car accidents for fun in public. Whatever. Nevertheless, that rich people will just crash cars for fun in public anyway. But those were some of the things where I'm like, I know people sometimes have issues with the politics behind the Dark Knight trilogy and Nolan films in general. I think that this film was, compared to Dark Knight Rises, this is probably the least egregious one.
Yeah.
For sure. They're not beating up Occupy Wall Street protesters.
It's the one that the action sequences are really, they're founded in, they're not too far-fetched, like in the Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah.
It's very simplistic stuff. It's not, I'm dropping you in a hole and I'll climb out of the hole. It's just, I blew up a hospital.
Yeah, there's definitely like, the spectacle in this film, I think, might not be what it is in, say, Dark Knight Rises, let alone Inception or Interstellar.
Yeah.
But they're all grounded in a way that enhances them without having to be super flashy or over the top. He still blew up a hospital anyway, but
It's like watching Fast Five as a bank heist movie and then watching Heat.
Yeah.
Like that level of difference.
Yeah.
in the realism is
this, I think, movie also
makes it more refreshing.
Yeah, this feels like this man, Dark Knight and Heat would be a good double feature.
I think it was a source of inspiration.
Absolutely.
I believe.
I have no doubt. Yeah.
I think I saw something or read something where he had watched Heat.
That makes sense.
And he incorporated elements of Heat.
That absolutely makes sense.
Yeah,
there's a realism to both of them that they share, for sure.
That just... Now I'm about to go on a Heat tangent. But yeah, there are elements of things that they do behind the scenes to give that weight to it that I don't think many other filmmakers would do. Which is why, I mean, he's one of my favorites. He's willing to go the extra mile and be like, no, you're actually going to go and I'm going to teach you. You're going to go learn how to do this. It's like, cool. Christian Bale's now a black belt jiu-jitsu artist.
Yeah.
For no reason whatsoever.
That's true.
Other than just like the two scenes he fights, he uses actual jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
But
all right. Any last words?
That's The Dark Knight.
That's The Dark Knight.
And that is Christopher Nolan. Oppenheimer. Quick word on Oppenheimer.
Are we going to see Cillian Murphy's dick?
Apparently we are.
Apparently we are.
Apparently we are, and I don't know how I feel about that. He's going full European on us. This is David Fincher, Ben Affleck, Gone Girl-esque type of stuff going on here.
This is a terrible joke. But I saw on Twitter, this is a horrible joke, but somebody said, will it be Fat Man or Little Boy?
Jesus Christ. Oh, man, I hope for the sake of Cillian Murphy, it's... Yeah, anyways, I don't even want to touch on that. I'm excited for it. Are you excited for it?
I'm excited for it, absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like this is hopefully a lot more grounded in realism. I think looking at all the trailers, all the images, if there is another Nolan film that this feels similar to, it's The Prestige. This doesn't have the same vibe as Tenet or Dunkirk, doesn't have the action that Inception or the Dark Knight trilogy does. This feels, just based on the vibe I get, most similar to Prestige in terms of its higher budget, certainly, but there's, again, it feels like the themes of an obsession, as well as, obviously, the stories about relationships.
The morality of the nuke and stuff like that.
The morality behind the nuke, which I hope we get plenty of. How do you feel about the R rating?
It's interesting. It's his first R-rated movie. I think Insomnia was also R-rated, right?
Yep,
Yeah,
that's correct.
The only thing I don't... The only reason I won't like it is because it just limits your ability to make money at the box office. That is a pure, just like...
Yeah, I feel like...
selfish reason why I would say don't make it rated R. Other than that, I am interested to see it. I wonder if... I don't know if he has the balls for this, and that's not... I'm not trying to mean in a negative way or anything, but if he would be willing to show Nagasaki and Hiroshima...
I was thinking about that too. I'm like, I wonder if this is going to be like a Oppenheimer biopic, because obviously he will have to include. I say he'll have to. It's based off a book. We could just look at the book and see what the book covers. It's a biopic of Oppenheimer. I don't think he will show the bombs being used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but I think Oppenheimer's personal reaction to them is going to be included 100%.
It's more, I was reading up on it, and it was more on, there is obviously the Los Alamos stuff that it will be fascinating to learn just because that period of U.S. history is fun to me. But what I'm really interested in is the post dropping of the bombs, when everybody looks at Oppenheimer as this kind of angel of death and stuff like that. And you know, he is obviously caught up in the Red Scare of the 50s and 60s. So there's a lot of hearings. There's going to be a lot of courtroom cases against him.
I don't doubt if this film honestly kind of pulls maybe... I think people, what they know of Oppenheimer is he designed the bombs. And I feel like they just immediately connect that to the bombs being dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I feel like this film is going to cover a lot longer span of time than people are thinking it's going to, in my opinion. Especially because based off of all the headlines I've seen, it goes in depth on his relationships. Apparently very in depth.
It'll be interesting. I hope it touches on his the motives behind making the bomb, and then his reluctance and kind of hypocrisy post the creation of the bomb. It's not to say that I have a strong opinion on Oppenheimer either way.
As a person,
I don't. I mean, it is what it is. It happened. But it will be interesting to see those themes get touched on. And I'm really excited for Cillian Murphy to finally get a leading role. In something that's not Peaky Blinders. So, it'll be very cool to see him. The years of being Nolan's eighth man paid off. So, I'll be there. I'll be there day one. I'll probably watch it like 2 or 3 times. I have to go watch it in 70 mil. At least
true.
once.
Yeah.
At least once. But yeah. Any last words? We're at 2:15.
No, I think we better end it now before we get any longer.
We appreciate you guys for sticking with it through the end. If you did stick through with it to the end. It's been a minute since we've had a long one.
Yeah.
So it was good to flex those muscles once again. But anyways, we're out of here. Next week is the big one.
Oh, yeah.
It's our Super Bowl of 2023.
The big ones.
The big ones, if you will. So we'll see you guys later. Take it easy. Have a good day. Stay cool.